And then you've got, as I've said on a couple other shows, a one-year flyer on a Marcus Davenport who play for play, top 10, top 15 type of edge defender. You're going to get a one-year flyer from him. He's never played more than 530 snaps. Can he have a 700-snap productive season opposite Donnell Hunter, who they just brought back, restructured his contract? That's a sneaky good group of edge rushers. Then you get this defense that, as a unit, was not good last year, but Brian Flores comes in with a completely different scheme, and a lot of times the scheme change is kind of all you need to get back to average. If they do get back to average, as our friend Greg Rosenthal, by the way, on Twitter, is from around the NFL, and a listener of the show, of course, as I've always mentioned, use the phrase creep back toward average.
Have we not trademarked that? Do we not get royalties or something?
I responded with a TM. I feel like that locks it in.
Oh, yeah? Just putting on a Twitter. X.
So he'll send a check soon.
Oh, okay.
Presumably. But he used the phrase, if the Vikings can creep back toward average defensively, might be higher on him. I think I'm being convinced. I'm drinking the purple Kool-Aid this offseason.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a little higher on the Vikings than most. I kind of like what the potential is, even though when you read the names, I'm a big read the depth chart and project them and stuff. That's how I don't love it, but I'm going to be a little higher on him. And there's one other thing. Ivan Pace Jr.
What?
Undrafted free agents rolling with the ones.
Okay.
Awesome linebacker out of Cincinnati. Underrated player. He should have been drafted. Might have a fine there.
Yeah. As I applaud your acceptance that you are drinking the purple Kool-Aid, I would simply bring up that etymologically, that phrase doesn't have the most positive, origin. It's not necessarily a good thing to be doing,
Yeah, I understand.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Well, Kool-Aid McKinstry is coming out this year too, by the way.
Yeah.
And Kool-Aid generally, that's not tainted, is pretty good, particularly the purple stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm buying into the Vikings. How about it? Is that better?
Sure.
Not that they're going to win 13 games. That's what's weird, right? Like the normal analysis is they overachieved, they won 13, they're going to regress.
So you're buying into them basically going back to being what they always are, which is like a slightly either side of 500 team who's probably owning.
They might be like a real 10-7 type of team, but a real 10-7 that's better when they get into the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? Like when they might be 10-7, and I might feel much better about them at 10-7 going into the playoffs than I did last year at 13-4. Maybe they can win some games.
Well, this is kind of what I mean about this idea of we've changed course, but we might still be lost in the ocean. Like I'm buying into them to be what they've always been for the last 5 years, other than last year where they caught the good end of variance and won all these close one-score games and ended up with 13 wins. Like they're functionally the same team again, despite changing things, which is slightly weird.
It takes time.
But it does. So the defense is the thing I'm most interested about. Like the offense is the thing that hasn't changed that much, other than letting go of Dalvin Cook and trying to reset the contracts and the salary cap situation and that kind of thing. The defense, though, is where it gets really interesting because they've had a lot of turnover, and maybe the most important change is at coordinator, where they've gotten rid of Ed Donatel, whose scheme was kind of disastrous last year, and brought over Brian Flores, who has traditionally run a 180-degree opposite type of scheme to the one Donatel was running, like heavy man coverage, most man coverage in the league type of scheme versus a very zone-heavy system. So now we've got all these incumbent players that were already there playing in this zone scheme have to play something completely different and fairly different to anything any of them have run. Certainly the ones that have been there for a period of time. You've got...
That's where Ivan Pace fits in well, because he's an incredible blitzer.
Right.
The way Flores likes to send his linebackers, that in particular is intriguing to me.
Then you've got, so you're saying, okay, what are Kwesi's moves personnel-wise? What has he been doing? Like, arguably, all of his most important defensive draft picks have yet to do anything. I mean, Lewis Seen last year broke his leg, but he's not running with the ones yet. You've got Andrew Booth Jr., the cornerback. Again, injuries have been an issue for him. Also not running with the ones. Mekhi Blackman, a guy we really like this year, drafted, might be getting to the stage where he's running at the ones. But generally speaking, the picks that he's made to come in and fix this thing are not factors yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's for all my buying in, not Kool-Aid drinking.
Yeah.
Buying into the Vikings. The scariest part is the cornerback depth chart in a system that's going to rely on them. So, when I'm watching the Vikings this year, and even in the preseason might tell a little bit, but not really.
Right.
How are they going to roll out there schematically? Is Flores going to ease into his ability to play man coverage? Because there's just nobody with any kind of track record on the cornerback depth chart right now. As much as we did like Mekhi Blackman, the other guys are Caleb Evans, Jawan Williams, former Patriot who's rarely been on the field. Andrew Booth, who you mentioned, is, early second-round pick who hasn't done much yet. Tate Gowan. There's nobody. There's nobody with any sort of track record.
No.
So are you going to be able to play man coverage with those guys? Byron Murphy, who probably play the slot, but you could move around a little bit. So that could be an obvious concern for the Vikings.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we've seen historically sometimes the scheme change just makes it a little better than it was.
No, there's definitely
and it's
something.
hard to not, like last year, some of the grading on players was fine. Like they actually had a decent pass rush last year in Minnesota, like off the edge with Hunter and Sedarius. Some of the players played well. Schematically, though, we saw Daniel Jones had an ocean to throw into. There were 5 quarterbacks last year. I remember looking at this. 5 or 6 quarterbacks last year had their best game from a PFF grade standpoint against the Vikings. Mac Jones and Jared Goff and Daniel Jones and Dak, I think. Like, they all had their very best game against the Vikings. It's unlikely that – I don't think that was just the defensive depth chart. Not that it looks that much better this year, but I don't think that was just the depth chart. Like, that's changing this year. So I'm expecting creep back toward bottom 10 for the Vikings as a unit.
No, there's definitely value to simply removing the thing that was problematic last year. Like the scheme was clearly not working. It was entrenching bad play, and it was definitely contributing to what you just talked about. So removing that as a factor should make it better. Like it's like the Urban Meyer thing, right? Simply not having Urban Meyer as your head coach anymore will make the team better. Now you get, okay, well now that's your baseline. Now what does Doug Peterson add on top of that? So that's the question for the Vikings. Like removing the Ed Donatel defensive scheme was something that needed to happen. Now you're completely changing the type of defense that those guys are going to be running. Does that move that baseline, the new baseline, up or down? So the baseline should go up from not having Ed Donatel in there. But then does adding Flores make that go up or down given like a polar opposite scheme to what these guys were running, and how much? Like that, I think, is an open question.
I mean, this is completely unrelated, but if Stephon Gilmore got traded to the Cowboys this offseason, if you just added like a Stephon Gilmore to this defense and pushed everybody down the corner depth chart and have the familiarity with Flores, I'd be just that one move, which doesn't exist, but just that one move would help a lot for the Vikings, right? They don't have that number one corner to lean on, so I'm interested to see what they do defensively. Just to circle back to the offense really quick. When I'm looking at offensive lines, when 4/5 of the offensive line you feel pretty good about, I think the Vikings might be in that spot. Garrett Bradbury got better. He's at least average now at center.
I feel good about
it.
2 or
feel
3.
Good about 3/5. The 2 tackles, Darisaw and Brian O'Neill.
Yeah,
and
I
Ezra Cleveland.
Feel good about them.
But you do this historically because Ezra Cleveland had a slow start to his career, and so did Bradbury. You forget that those guys get better, much like your DTR takes. They've gotten better.
Ezra Cleveland has never had a pass blocking grade above 55.
He has a good run game, though.
Okay.
Good run blocker.
But, yeah, Kirk Cousins was getting his ass kicked last year. You need somebody to actually hold up and pass block.
3/5 of the offensive line, though, still feel. I don't know. They'll be solid.
I think they'll
be solid.
Generous. I mean, Ed Ingram was problematic last year. Ezra Cleveland has never been good as a pass blocker, and as much as Bradbury was better last year, he still wasn't good and is still kind of vying for the job with Austin Schlottman.
That was one of Kwesi's first moves, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I feel like he's got some like secret random undervalued players like Schlottman and Josh Oliver, and we'll see what happens.
I would just make the point that I don't think it would be tremendously difficult to upgrade any of the 3 interior offensive line spots.
But I'll be watching wide receiver too, man. Adam Thielen got older and they moved on from him. Jordan Addison replacing him. So that's like the story of the Vikings this year is Jordan Addison replacing and Adam Thielen.
My number one receiver.
Brian
in the draft.
Asamoah or an Ivan Pace replacing an Eric Kendricks, right? Like all of these replacing as Darius Smith, replacing some of these higher priced players with younger players or unproven players. And if they get decent production out of those guys, they'll be all right.
Mm-hmm.
Time's up on the Vikings. Let's get to the over-under here. They're at 8.5. A 13-win team is at 8.5.
Yeah.
I'm taking the over on the Vikings this year.
Taking the over.
Yeah.
8.5, 9. Okay, yeah. I'll buy that. Over. 9.
Regression, but still maybe, I think it's them and the Lions.